Jesus!
The Aliens license. How in precious fuck is it that you haven't generated a game with even the beginnings of potential since the Super fucking Nintendo, and yet for some baffling ass reason, no matter how many B-grade pixelated lobotomies you subject us to, we're somehow still affixed front and center, bowl and spoon aloft, buttocks clenched in anticipation of the latest ladle full of unmitigated baseless hype? One of the many hazards of being an innovator, or in the case of Aliens, a popularizer, is the inevitable moment 20 years distant when the snake devours its own tail and you discover you've been ripped off with such X-lax fucking regularity that you've effectively become regarded as a cliche. Aliens did not invent Space Marines. You can thank Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers novel all the way back in the 1950s for that, but they were an important enough popularizer that, simply put, in an industry suffocating beneath a proverbial haystack of troglodytic Space Marine tough guys, Aliens Colonial Marines, even in its best possible moment, is just another fucking needle. I'm going to be perfectly upfront in my admission that I am far from this game's intended audience, if for no other reason than due to the simple fact that while I regard Alien as a massively influential science fiction horror masterpiece, that affection does not extend to its inferior sequel. In the original film, the aliens, or rather xenomorphs, because God forbid they retain an element of mystery, James Cameron, were originally depicted as your darkest abiding nightmare. Shadowy predators that strike from the darkest corners of the room and once emerged appear nigh invulnerable. Even when the ship's captain comes armed with a fucking flamethrower, the contest isn't even close to even. The creature is only given pause once it's literally been flushed out a goddamn airlock. And in Aliens? Well, fuck, just shoot him. And sadly, this is an impression that Aliens Colonial Marines elects to solidify by degenerating the xenomorphs into little more than acid-spewing skeletal bullet sponges for whom the only discernible consequence of failing to hit them flush in their phallic dome is that you'll then suffer a mandatory QuickTime event. But I'll say this much all the same. This game's combination of antique first-person shooting tropes like a proper weapon inventory system, body armor, health packs, System Shock-esque audio logs you've inherited from the recently deceased, and hold to the guardrail as I reveal this, but health that doesn't fucking regenerate does at times favorably coalesce to convey a potent retro feeling that the vast majority of modern FPS developers have long since abandoned, to the sad detriment of market variety. Critiquing intangibles like atmosphere, movement, or the eternally elusive feel is an invariably treacherous exercise, but there can be no doubt, in a thoroughly tangible sense, something about this game's weapon handling feels profoundly and impressively fucked. And while the feeling of bullets simply don't phase targets, human and xenomorph alike, is harder to objectively prove, it becomes difficult to refute when, for example, crouching behind chest-high cover fails to shield the player from his own fucking grenade blast. But Colonial Marines' true maladies are primarily existential. Simply put, the game is called Aliens, so where in jolly fuck are the ever-loving aliens? And why, on the sparse but welcome occasions that you do decree that we can see some actual fucking aliens in an Aliens game, does the gameplay promptly degenerate into your appropriately helmet-bedecked partner planning his just this sight of immutably fucking useless ass in front of a locked door while shouting, "Hold off the infinite barrage of acid-spewing death machines with your Derringer water pistol while I Donatello this shit the fuck open just in time for you to finish murdering them all anyway, and in so doing yield my efforts utterly fucking fruitless." I found Aliens Colonial Marines to be a downright baffling experience. While playing through the game, I found myself perpetually vacillating between genuine enjoyment and rifling through the black market yellow pages to put out a hit on John Mulkey, but I think I finally arrived at a conclusion that conforms to both reason and, more importantly, my personal fucking taste. At this point, I believe we're all more than passably familiar with the following quote: "Take away the Aliens license, and you've got a shooter that has no reason to exist," initially quipped by a Game Informer hand puppet by the name of Jeff Cork. Yes, Jeff, that's all very droll, and the exact variety of sound and fury signifying nothing I've come to expect from a magazine that essentially functions as GameStop's unofficial propaganda ministry, and the legions of gibbering Kotaku fanfucks have certainly ensured that single empty phrase has somehow logged more miles than Charles Lindbergh, but it also happens to be stone dead fucking wrong. Without the burden of the presumptive expectation associated with the Aliens license, this might have been rightly appraised as a refreshingly old-fashioned retro first-person shooting experience, what with its old-timey power-ups, light stealth elements, health packs, and marginally less linear approach to level design. Instead, it will be forever regarded as that Aliens game with no fucking aliens in it, and frankly, That essay is perfectly fucking fair. It's a sad irony, but turning this game into a generic Space Marine shooter devoid of a commercial license would have been the best possible creative scenario. The story certainly fails to accrue even the faintest modicum of benefit from the Aliens license. I know what you're thinking, what story? All I saw were 7 successive hours of brazen fan service, 90% of which conflicts canonically with the film it's based on. It's true, you need an electron microscope and a dowsing rod to spot the shit, but it's occasionally there, tucked quietly away in a corner, suffocating beneath the weight of a license its creators were never once up to the task of reinvigorating. So is Aliens Colonial Marines bad? Yes. No. Fuck! Look, at the end of the day, all that really matters is what you're looking for out of the game. If you go into the game expecting to be horrified by nightmarish xenomorph set pieces, just look the fuck elsewhere right now. But if you're just looking for a marginally less linear variant of Call of Duty or Battlefield, this game may in fact scratch your proverbial rectal itch. Look, it's not as good as Borderlands. Fuck, it's not even as good as Duke Nukem Forever, really. But at the end of the day, I never once experienced the urge to cast it into the fires of Mount Doom. And after Hitman Abomination, that is almost an achievement in and of itself. I'm Razor Fist God. Fucking Speed.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal. Send me a kiss by wire. Baby, my heart's on fire. If you refuse me, honey, you lose me. Then you'll be left alone. Oh, baby, telephone and tell me I'm your own.